to a brand new year, halfway through our 5th season of the show. I'm Jenna Morton.
And I'm Tosh Taylor, completely baffled that A, it's 2023, and B, that we're halfway through season 5. What's happening?
And basically like halfway through January as well already.
Yeah.
Like, this is just, time is warped.
It is warped. It is. We wanted to start off this new year with some really cool research that Jenna has done. And it's remarkable, as all your research is. You always blow me away at your abilities.
I find information that's out there. This isn't like
but
deep investigative journalism here.
Well, you know what I love about your deep investigative journalism is that I can then take it and use it as a show topic for this, a show topic for when I'm on the radio. It is amazing.
And it is. This one is one of my favorite topics and one of my favorite things that always happens in January, which is why we're going to talk today about baby names. Because every year, everywhere I have lived in January, the local newspaper and the local government will put out a list of the top names of the year. And usually the newspapers put out those lovely little inserts with all the baby pictures, and you can read all the names people have named their children. And my family actually will save these inserts for me in various cities.
No way, really?
Yes, because they know how much I love to sit there and look at the names and think about what went into choosing that name and looking at the different trends. And I've long before I had children, I was fascinated with names and how people choose names and the names that you think maybe should have been chosen for you.
Yes.
I think actually, it's funny, I think it stems from a cousin of mine who is a writer. And as a kid, I remember her having baby named books on her shelf because she would use them when she was trying to come up with names to name her characters, and she would be looking for things and looking at the meanings and the origins. And so I grew up reading baby name books.
That's interesting. And really cool, because I mean, I'm not a writer, but that's brilliant. Nowadays, you could just Google baby names online, which is what I did when naming my children. But but back then, of course, you had to actually purchase these things.
Yeah, and it's funny too. I think people have that idea of, oh, well, I'll just go online and look. It's very easy to get overwhelmed by the amount of information online, and also you can find like a really cool thing that website might be gone in a year, which is what happened to us.
Oh, really?
When we were naming our children, we found this really fantastic website that was totally the perfect thing for me. Because it was this website that had taken data from throughout North America, and I think even from Europe as well, and had created graphs in a searchable database where you could put a name in, and it would show you over the past 100 years the popularity peaks and dips of that name.
Oh, I would like that too.
Oh, it was the best. And after, I think about 5 years or so, it was just too much for them to have the upkeep of the site, and it's gone now.
Which makes sense.
But it was, we loved it. And it made such a difference to us when we were naming our kids, because I think most families kind of go through this conversation of, if you're going to name a child, what are the parameters? What are your values? What is it that you're looking for in a name? Some people want a name that's popular. Some people want a name, especially here in New Brunswick, that works very well in various languages. Other people, like us, we wanted a name that sounded classic, but also kind of modern. It didn't sound old, but most importantly, we wanted a name for each of our kids that they probably weren't going to have someone else in their class with that name.
Yes.
That was a big determining factor for us. We actively worked to stay away from the most popular names, which is funny because I love when the list of popular names come out, but we work to keep away from them.
And then you've ended up with 2 of the 3 names have ended up being very popular names. I think after both of yours were born, they've kind of come up, and they clearly were following the Pickle Planet trends, maybe, if that's what's happening. But you have a Clara and a Rory, which are both very popular names now.
They are, although the name Rory is much more popular among girls than it is boys, which is obviously a Gilmore Girls.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Which I totally love and get. And I was actually somewhat perturbed as a huge Gilmore Girls fan when the main female character's name was Roy, because I'm like, but that's my family name for a man. and this is going to become a popular girl's name, and it did. So it does stand out because our Rory is a boy, and he has yet to end up, I think, even in the same school. I think there is one a few years ahead of him, but I don't think they've been in the same school at the same time. But that name, for me, has deep family roots and goes back generations in my family.
Yeah. And I grew up with a Rory who, he's probably 3 years older than me. And their family had they were all R names. Every kid had an R name. But I remember growing up thinking, well, first of all, his brother Rafe was my age, which I've never met another Rafe in my entire life.
Yeah, that's a different one.
And then Rory was the older brother, and I just remember thinking, like, Rafe is a really different name, but then Rory too. I was like, wow. And then I have a niece now who is in her 20s, and she's a Rory. However, she's an Aurora. So she's named after Sleeping Beauty, and
which was also one of the names that was always kind of on my list of potential.
Really?
Aurora, yes. But I had never thought to shorten it to Rory. I love that.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, oh, now I totally would have used that. I'm not gonna have to name another girl in my life.
No.
But, there we go.
Pets, maybe?
Maybe, but yeah.
You're not going to use Rory now. You have a son. Yeah.
I do. Yes, and it's funny. I think I'm not sure if I've talked about this one on the podcast before, but when we were naming Clara, our daughter, she was our first, and we had a couple names that were kind of we front runners, and we didn't know actually until she was born whether it was going to be a boy or a girl. And we had two really kind of front runner names for a girl, Clara and Sadie. And both we liked both names. Sadie actually had a family connection on both sides, and so we were kind of leaning towards that. And the determining factor for us was we asked the labor and delivery nurses when we were there. We're like, because that's part of the chatter, right?
Yes.
That's people, you're having a baby. Do you know what you're having? Do you know the name yet? We're like, no, actually, let's talk about this.
You tell me.
Because we made a very conscious decision not to talk to our families. We didn't tell our families what our front runner choices were because we didn't want to be influenced by anyone's thoughts. We wanted something that worked for us.
Which is, if I could give you any advice, that's it. That is it, because your child is not to satisfy someone else's name choices. That's for sure.
No, and people will tell you what they think of those names, and I went to school with a so-and-so and they weren't nice, and you're like, but that was my favorite name, and now you've ruined it. Don't open yourself up for that. No. Just make your choice. Or ask strangers maybe, because then you don't really care what they think. So we asked labor and delivery nurses, we're thinking Sadie or Clara. And they're like, oh, yeah, those are both good names. They're like, I've delivered half a dozen Sadies in the past year or two. I've never delivered a Clara. Like, okay, thanks for making our decision.
Yes, yeah.
Because that's what we wanted. And sure enough, I've seen more and more girls named Sadie of my daughter's age. At the time, I didn't think it was a fairly popular name. We thought of it as more of an older name. But it was people doing that same thing we were doing and going kind of back in their family or back in their knowledge and picking a name that still sounded kind of cute and young and current, but had those older tones to it. And so Sadie became not popular enough to hit like the top 20 in New Brunswick, but it's pretty up there if you look at kids in the schools with our children.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny, we talked to labor and delivery nurses, but it was actually my doctor when Erin was born, she was either going to be Julia or Erin, and I was really leaning heavily towards Julia because her middle name's Joanne, so I thought Julia Joanne sounded really good. And so then she was born, and my doctor said, what's her name? And we gave the two options, and my doctor said, oh, you know what? She really looks more like an Erin. And Jason and I were like, yeah, like she's definitely an Erin. And she is through and through an Erin and not a Julia. And then my doctor had a baby and named her Julia.
So you're like, are you telling the truth or are you just saving that name?
I will laugh at that. I will take that one. I will die on that ship. I thought that was pretty funny.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a good name. Julia is a wonderful name.
It is a fabulous name, and not really one of the top ones in New Brunswick either, which is the research you were talking about. It's not really in-depth research. I know how to find press releases and this really cool database of information that was available online. And I used the two of them to come up with the lists and make them much more readable and easily accessible for people. So on Pickle Planet, the website right now, there is a link you can go to, and you can find the top baby names in New Brunswick since 1980.
It's bonkers.
Yeah, it's really fun to watch. And so every single list for every year is not there, but the link to find them is.
Because I was going through this before we started the show today, and I was like, well, I wonder when my kids were born, 2012, 2014, and those are the years you skipped over.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have to hit this other link.
So yeah, you have to go through the link to find those. And if anyone's having trouble and really wants to know, you could reach out and I might be able to go and do it for you. But basically what I did was I took it in 10-year gaps, because really when you sit down and look at the information, over 10-year spans, things don't change a lot.
I was going to say, is it always Liam?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So if you are watching this on TV, you might see I've made notes to bring with me today. So Liam has been in the top 10 of baby names in New Brunswick since 2005.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this year, 2022, he came in second after having been first the previous year. But yeah, since 2005, the name Liam has shown up every year on the release that comes out from the government of the top names. And one thing to remember if you're looking for those numbers and trying to like figure out, that kind of graph. So for a while, the province was putting out the top 10 girl names and top 10 boy names each year. They've just started putting out the top 20 names, which I think is a great move.
Yep.
But it's also very interesting then to see, and I would love to do that deeper layer of research to know, and maybe someone out there knows how to access government information. I don't right now. But this year, so for 2022, the province released the top 20 names, and you had to go down to number 8 before you found a name that was generally associated and would have been on the previous girl list.
Right.
So they also didn't break down. They used to, when they would put out their annual statistics, would say there were X number of boy births and X number of girl births. I'm totally fine with just knowing the number of births in the province. I understand why we're moving.
Which was what, 5,900-ish? You have that in your cue
52,
cards?
yes.
Oh, there we go.
So this is another cue card I have here. So yes, the past 5 years, I think I have jotted down there 4 years. So yeah, for 2022 in New Brunswick, there were just over 5,000 births recorded in the province.
That's amazing.
And usually what happens too is if you follow these each year like I do, you'll notice that the numbers sometimes shift as they realize that, because they put the number out before they've actually got all of December's information in, so
Which
it's
makes
not an
sense.
exact number, but
Yeah.
just over 5,000 births in New Brunswick registered for 2022, which was down 1,000 plus from the previous year. 2021, we had over close to 6,500 births. We had 6,443 is the official number according to the province right now.
Is that
which
the
is,
pandemic babies?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Because if you keep going back, like 2020 was just over 5,000, 2019 was just over 5,000, 2016 was the last time you had more than 6,000 births in the province.
What did we have happen in 2016?
Well, no,
In
you'd have to go
2015,
back
yeah.
15.
Is that like
that
ice
was-
storm year?
It was actually, because that's the year my boys turned 2, and their birthday got stormed out. And that was like 2015. You could not move that winter.
Yeah.
It was storm after storm after storm of snow up to here.
So we know what New Brunswickers are doing when the power goes out.
So every time that we need a population boost, we just need to shut the province down. There we go.
That's unbelievable. Like those, I see.
Yeah, they're
I
right
also
back
like
there.
stats. I just
I
don't
know.
like doing the research for them, and that is impressive.
Let's just read back a
impressive.
couple press releases
Yeah.
the government put out. That's where all the numbers are coming from. But speaking of names, so yeah, so Liam has been on the list that the government has put out every year since 2005. The name Noah, which is number 1 for 2022, that was the top name in the province. That name has been on the list since 1999.
Wow.
Like,
It's a beautiful name. I love
consistently.
Noah. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is an extremely popular name in New Brunswick for 20 years now.
Yeah.
So I'm actually starting to get really excited to see in the next couple years, coming up, I would say probably in the next 2 years, I'm thinking we're going to see a shift in these names, because if you look back, so 1980, 1990, the lists aren't terribly different. And then by the time you get into 2000, it starts to shift. But then 2000 to now, the names are very similar on all those lists of the most popular names. So despite all the like, oh my goodness, these people are coming up with these crazy names and making up names, and that always happens.
Yeah, they don't make the list. That's just that.
Yeah, they're not the most popular names.
Yeah.
Every now and then though, like there are some that'll kind of pop up for a year or two. Like Jackson in its various spellings, like
True.
the JAX version,
Yeah.
that had a little bump and then it kind of went back down. But what's really interesting too is looking at Nova Scotia's list. Because if you look at Nova Scotia's list, there's a lot of similar names, but then there's always some a little bit different. And this year, Nova Scotia's list had a lot of names that I was like, oh, I've heard that once or twice, but it hasn't made it onto these like
Really?
New Brunswick's popular lists yet. Like the name Beau.
Oh, Beau's oh man.
Beau made the top 10 list in New Brunswick, in Nova
it
Scotia.
didn't.
Yes.
Beau made the top.
Yep.
I will tell my mom that's her favorite boy name.
Well, and I'm seeing it as a girl's name as well, Beau,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
it's a very great name to have that kind of play.
Yeah.
That it is just a great solid name, and so I think that based on how long Noah, Liam, William, Olivia, all these Emma, there's a lot of names that have been on New Brunswick's list for a good 20-some years, and I think that seems to be kind of the cycle. So I think we're going to see some changes in the next couple of years because, you know, like I said, if you look back to like 1980 and 1990, your top names, Matthew's on both those lists,
Yep.
Michael's on both the lists, Christopher's on both the list, like, and how much is that like names from our childhood, right? Like that is
Everybody's
that's who we
married
went
to a
school
Jason
with.
or a Mike or a Matt. Yeah.
Yep. Jessica's, Amanda, Samantha's, Sarah's, Jennifer, Julie. Those are all your common, most popular names
My
in the
best
80s,
friend's names.
90s,
Yeah.
into the 2000s. So by 2000, we started to see the shift. Like Sarah was still in the top, but Madison made an appearance.
Really?
And Madison stays kind of off and on the list from 2000 till the last couple years in New Brunswick.
Interesting. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of Madisons. I'm just surprised that there's enough that it made the list.
There are, yeah, in New Brunswick. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
everywhere, but
Yeah.
yeah. And again, yeah, like 2000, you started to see a shift in the boys' names. There, you don't see Matthew, Christopher, Michael. They were not in your top 5 anyway. They might still be in the top 20, but you could see them dropping, and now they don't make the list.
Right.
But you started to see Brandon and Joshua, Jacob, and then those names kind of stay with us. And really by 2010 was the tip over for some of those, what we think of as kind of traditional older names, William, Liam, Noah, these names that are still with us as the most popular names that were, you know, people of our generation
Yeah.
kind of going back to, I want something that doesn't sound so trendy and doesn't sound so much like what I grew up with. And we started to go even further back and went to, William and
Busting
names
out
like that.
the older names. And I do wonder, do you think that they'll go even further back? I did read something at the end of the year where they're saying like this year might be the year that we see the return of Ethel and Esther and, you know, Eunice even, you know, which I can't see people going as far as Eunice, but maybe there's a possibility. Same with Ethel. Esther, I have met a couple Esthers over the past few years.
Esther has come up. Yeah. I think for me, it's like, can you call a baby that name?
I know.
Right? Like that's like, they're lovely names. And
Yes.
usually if someone chooses those names too, I think there's some kind of connection to them in your past. But for me, it was always like, can I say that to a little bundle of baby face? Like Howard. There's a lot of Howards in my family. Like, I don't think I could have gone with that.
Well, you call him Howie, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
which
okay.
is what happens to most people in
Yeah.
my family whose name is Howard. For most of their life, they go by Howard. But then you have that transition of
Yeah.
then you have to teach people no, my name is Howard, or my name is Richard,
Yes.
or having that full name. And it's some people don't feel the need to do that, and that's fine. And then some people, don't go by their real name anyway. Yeah. Like the two of us.
Either one of us. But that was something that was 100% one of my name things, was that they have to be interchangeable between child and adult. I didn't want the cute little name. I have a big thing with names that end in Y. I'm just going to put it out there because I feel like they're young names. My brother's name, for example, Jeremy, which is not like a baby name at all. I just have this thing.
I was going to say, because when you said that, I'm thinking like Molly or that kind of like,
That I just
Ollie
feel like
instead of Oliver.
Yeah. There's something about it. But Jeremy. I also, my entire life, hated the name Sarah. Now I have a daughter
Have you told
named
your
Sarah.
daughter?
Yeah, she does know. I don't know where that transition happened, but it's my grandmother's name. And I think I subconsciously hated the name because my grandmother hated her name. So she always went by her middle name, which is Evelyn, and didn't like the fact that her first name was Sarah. So I think that I just kind of pulled that through. And then when Jason, my husband, suggested Sarah, I was like, yep. That's I can do that. Yeah.
I wonder what it was. Did your grandmother say why she didn't like the name Sarah?
She thought it was young.
Really?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I wonder if she thought it was too common as well, because it would have been a much more popular
in the 30s.
name
Then.
Yeah.
And it was like, so Sarah Evelyn is a name in my family that you will find in every branch of the family tree. There is a Sarah Evelyn, and it makes its way through for many, many, many generations, and hopefully always will. At least the Evelyn part of it.
Which I think is a lovely name, and exactly
beautiful.
one of those names too that like you could like Evie, Lynn. There's so many kind of variations of it that you could have that little. But I can even picture calling a tiny little infant Evelyn.
No, and that's true. And the name actually has. I mean, I'm sure it's not making lists, but I have at least one friend that has Evelyn, that she named her daughter Evelyn, and I was like, you sure? This is why you don't consult your friends.
I don't know. I could see that one coming, because some of the names that are still in the popular list for New Brunswick for girls, like Charlotte and Violet, Amelia, they have that. Like Evelyn has that similar kind of sound and connotation, I think, but hasn't been on the list. So it's a good candidate
to make it come
to
back.
make that transition there.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it. When I was younger, I would not have, because I like, even as my middle name, I didn't like my first name or my middle name. And if I told you my maiden name, you'd be like, geez, your parents. But I think, like, your name is not Jenna. Like, so did you also feel that way, like, as a kid, where you were just like, what is this name? What is, like, why? Or was it just that your name was so popular?
So the name Jennifer, which is the name that's on my birth certificate, was extremely popular in the late 70s into the 80s. Like it was, there it is on the top 5 list for 1980 in New Brunswick. Not that I was born here, but my mom really loved the name Jenna, but she was worried that it would be too different because it was not a common name at the time. So Jennifer was my birth name, and everyone called me Jenna.
So always?
Always.
Okay.
It's always been. There was never a back and forth like a Howie Howard thing. It was just like, there are even government documents where my name is Jenna.
Okay.
The government's just kind of had to go along with the fact. I'm like, nah, they're both my names. So.
That's it. Same with Tosh. All my banking stuff, they're like, who? Yeah. I'm the same person, I swear.
Yeah. So anyway, we have talked about names for the allotted time that we have with you today.
Man, it's nice to be back together.
It is. So if you want to know more about popular names in New Brunswick, and even some of the ones in Nova Scotia and all the way back to the 80s, you can find those on Pickle Planet. And like I said, it's really just links to other sources where I found the information, but I put it together in a spot for you. And very soon, we will have those little inserts showing up in the newspapers to look at not necessarily the most popular names of the year, but just the names that people have chosen that they've put out there. So I'm really excited for that. So please share your thoughts on how you came up with names and your favorite names, the names you think are going to be on that list. I'd love to make a prediction list. That's what we'll work on. What do we think is going to be on the list for 2030?
Beautiful. Okay, we're in for it. And we're back in for the second half of season 5 of our show. Thank you for sticking around with us for so long, and we'll see you next time.